Bonjour. That's it. The rest is English, sorry. So, to start out, we're going to do a little task together. So could everybody please stand up? And then leave the building. No, I'm only kidding. So, is everybody ready for this? You really have to do it. Okay? Ready? One, two, three. Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Why did you do that? Have a seat. So in a smaller group, I would ask why you actually did that. Some of you would say, well, you're at the front of the room with a thing on your head, so we're supposed to do whatever you say. Some of you would say, I didn't want to look like a jerk, like I'm the only one sitting down and everyone else is standing. Lots of reasons why people go along with rituals. You just did a ritual, actually, if you didn't know. And it's not, we're studying now, actually, things like cults, for example, that have lots of rituals. And when you say, God, how do these people do all these crazy things? Like, aren't they thinking anything, or don't they want to ever stop what they're doing and think about it? But you just sort of go along with it. Social rituals in particular are so powerful, and there's such a group presence to them that suddenly we're doing things that we wouldn't otherwise do. And it's a ritual, by the way, because if out there I had said to one of you, hey, can you clap your hands and stomp and things and shout at me? You would say he's crazy and you would call the police. But once we're in this setting, then it's perfectly appropriate for us to do that. And by the way, you now feel differently than you did before you did the ritual. So you're a little more active kind of than you were. And you also did I saw people looking at each other and smiling a little bit. You just shared a group ritual as well. And that's going to have an influence on your feelings, your thoughts, and also your behavior. That's partly why we got interested in studying rituals to begin with, because they're such powerful and ubiquitous human activities. We do them in all domains of life. I'll show you a bunch of domains that we've worked on. But I think the key insight is that we often don't think we're a person who does rituals, but we actually do them all the time. You just did one, you have them in different domains of your life. And I want to walk you through a little bit the research that we've done on rituals, because overall you can see, again, that they're everywhere in life, and they serve so many different functions for us as we try to navigate our difficult lives sometimes. So we did, the first experiment we ever did was at Harvard Business School. We took some undergraduates and made them do the exact ritual that you just did. So they were in groups of 5, and they stood in a circle, and they faced each other, and they did the clapping and stomping and everything like that. And just like you, people start out kind of not doing it together very well, and then after a little while, they're perfectly in sync, and they're staring at each other and laughing, which is interesting in and of itself. One of the groups, these were random strangers. One of the groups at the end of the experiment said, are we allowed to get each other's email addresses so we can keep in touch? Just because they did a crazy clapping thing in a circle. What we did in this experiment was we had them run around campus on a scavenger hunt, and their goal was to take pictures of themselves doing all sorts of ridiculous things. The experiment was some of the groups did what I just told you. Some of the groups did a more typical get acquainted task that we often do when we start out in new teams. Other groups just did nothing. And the question was, would doing this ritual make the teams actually perform better? So the task that we had was run around campus, take pictures of yourselves doing silly things. I'll just show you a couple. One of them was pretending to be strong in front of the university gym. There's one team doing that. There's a strong biblical Samson thing that happens. People think strong means pushing a pillar. I'm not exactly sure why. Here's a second one. Looking scared we have these underground tunnels at Harvard Business School. Here's some students looking scared. And they had 30 of these, and they only had 60 minutes to do it. So they were running around campus trying to take as many pictures as they could, and what we looked at was how well did they do on the scavenger hunt. And it turns out that teams that did a group ritual before did better on the scavenger hunt. Now, did they do like twice as good? No, of course not. They got a couple more pictures than the other groups. It didn't make them the most amazing team ever. It just made them slightly better than the other groups. And the reason that it was better, actually, we can look at the data, is when the groups start, they have to decide, should we go to the gym first or the tunnels first, and then go over there? And they argue. They just argue with each other, like, what's the best path around campus? And groups that did a ritual are better at coordinating. So they're more likely to agree on a plan sooner, and that's why they do better. So it's not that doing a group ritual makes you run faster or something like that. What a group ritual does in this case is it makes you be able to agree and coordinate on a plan of action. It's not a life group-changing effect, but it's there and it's consistent, and we see it again and again. It's just that simple idea that we can take strangers who've never met, have them do a kind of ridiculous group ritual of clapping and stomping, and change the way they interact with each other and the way they perform, even though it's not a huge effect, still is something that's quite easy to implement, actually, in group settings in general. And of course, we didn't invent the idea of group rituals by any means. I'm just going to show you two of my favorites. You may know those guys. That's a New Zealand rugby team doing the haka before their match. I used to make a joke and say, that's my colleagues at Harvard Business School. No, nothing? Okay. Here's the one that in the corporate setting. So this, Walmart used to make their employees do this. I don't think they do anymore. But you would do this in the morning when you started out your day. And one of my favorite things about this slide is someone would be shouting, give me a W, give me an A, and somebody had to shout out loud, give me a squiggly, which is a very strange thing, actually, to shout out at any point in your life. Again, the idea is it's a little silly to do, just as you felt as well, but these might have effects, again, on how much the team likes each other. And in fact, when we do surveys of organizations and we ask employees, do you do any sort of ritual at work? Like when you start meetings, is there anything you do? After work, is there anything that you do that's kind of a ritual? Employees that say they have a ritual actually report higher job satisfaction, and they like their coworkers more. Not twice as much, but they like them a little bit more just because they have a ritual. And we can show in our experiments that, of course, it's causal, that when you do a ritual, it will cause you actually to perform better as a group. So that was kind of the first investigation that we did of rituals, which is one that we're used to. Kind of we're aware of group rituals. If you ever played sports, your team probably had a group ritual before and after the game. But that got us really interested in actually what is a ritual? So we kind of know what it is. So we knew like the 3 times and then 5 times. That feels like a ritual. Doing it all together, that feels kind of like a ritual. But we really wanted to drill down on what it actually means to have a ritual or not, in part so we could help organizations design rituals that would be interesting and effective for employees rather than not. And I think it's a slippery slope. So you can think about what's a ritual and what's a habit. They're very related to each other. One way to think about what a ritual is it's all the things that you do that aren't the thing itself. And what I mean by that is, so think of those guys before a rugby match doing the haka. They're doing that so that they will perform better in the game, but it's not actually the thing that they're trying to do, and we know that because if they did the haka the entire game, they would lose really badly because they'd be stomping, and the other team would just be running and killing them. So it's the things that we do in the service of trying to get better at something, but not the thing itself. That's the first thing to keep in mind. It's not the behavior, it's the activities surrounding the behavior that are more ritualistic. And then the other thing that makes something a ritual versus, say, a habit or a routine is that kind of little things like the order start to matter, or the time of day, or who's there starts to matter. And the more those things matter to you, the more it's more of a ritual and less of a habit. And my favorite example of this actually is I was working with, believe it or not, I was working with some dentists on a project trying to get little kids to brush their teeth, which is one of the hardest human tasks actually to accomplish, is to get kids to brush their teeth. It turns out that dentists know extraordinary things about how we behave and how we live. One thing that they know is they can tell exactly the order in which you brush your teeth. So just out of curiosity, so if you start brushing your teeth here, your teeth are more worn down because when we start brushing, we're really excited, and then by the end, we're tired of it, and we go, ugh, and then those teeth don't get as clean. So they knew all this stuff, and the other thing that they told me was they basically said there's two kinds of people in the world. I said, okay, that's interesting. And they said some people in the morning brush their teeth and then take a shower, and other people take a shower and then brush their teeth. How many people brush your teeth and then take a shower? And then how many take a shower and then brush your teeth? It's insane. It's almost always like 50-50, 60-40, all over the world, by the way. All over the world, that's the split. You could call that a habit because, every morning I brush my teeth, I take a shower. That's kind of a habit. It's a ritual if I asked you to switch the order, would you feel weird all day? Some of you who brush your teeth first and then take a shower, if you think about doing the shower first, your mouth feels weird. It's like, no, that's incorrect. That's closer to a ritual, right? The habit is the behaviors. You got to take a shower, you got to brush your teeth. The ritual is that the order matters to you. It feels wrong, it feels different if you don't. And with that sort of loose definition, but we have sort of a continuum from it's a habit all the way up to it's a ritual, we started to look at a lot of other domains of rituals to figure out across the diversity of human life where rituals come into play. And one place that really came to mind for us, actually, I was reading This Republic of Suffering. This is the outgoing president of Harvard, actually. She's an historian. And she wrote about in the American Civil War how people coped with death. Sorry to bring the mood. We'll get back to toothbrushing in a minute. How people coped with death. And she looked in the American South during the Civil War. Everyone lost several family members. The casualty rate was so high that it was a state of permanent grief and mourning in that culture. And so she looked at what people did to deal with that sort of loss. And what was so fascinating was, commonly we think of you wear black when somebody dies. That's one way to mourn someone. In the American South, what happened was you would wear black for a little while if you lost a loved one. Then you would wear gray for a while. Then you would still wear gray, but you could add like lavender colors a little bit, and then you could go back to dressing the way you dressed. So that was the first interesting thing. And the second thing was the amount of time you did each of those depended on how close you were to the person who died. So if your husband died, it was like 6 months of black, 6 months of gray, 6 months. But if it was like your fourth cousin or something, it was like an hour, and then you were done or something like that. I'm exaggerating. But they really did vary based on how close you were. One reason if you think of that as a social ritual, it's quite lovely because I know when I encounter someone what stage of grief they're in as a social function. So now with all of you, I have no way of knowing if you experienced a loss in your lives. With clothing, actually, you can show other people, here's where I am. And because I'm a psychologist by training, I also thought, I wonder if people use it on themselves. So imagine you're feeling very sad about a loss. You could literally look down at yourself and say, well, I have lavender on. I must be sort of healing. I must be getting a little bit better. And we wanted to test that in experiments to see if these rituals actually help people through grief and loss. So the first thing we did was we surveyed many, many cultures all over the world for their grieving rituals, their mourning rituals. First off, every culture we could find has grieving or mourning rituals when someone passes away. In fact, one of the ways we identify whether a group of early humans was a culture or not is if they engage in ceremonial burials. So if there's a body and there's things around it that are symbolic, that's a way we can say, oh, they must have had culture rather than not. That's how profound grieving rituals are in the human experience. So what we found was that they're everywhere, except then right after the fact that they're everywhere, it seems like they're completely random. So, for example, in some cultures you must wear black, and if you were to wear any other color at a funeral, it would be deeply disrespectful. In other cultures you must wear white, and if you were to wear any other culture, it would be deeply disrespectful. And there are other color combinations in different cultures as well. It's as though, and I don't mean to downplay the importance of religion at all, but it's as though humans thousands of years ago, someone passed away, they felt something, they wanted to do something in their physical environment, and color is a very salient thing to use. But right after that, it was like the color can be different across all of these cultures. And it's not just color. So one that's near and dear to my heart is having to do with hair, because I struggle a little bit with hair. So fascinating variation on what you do with hair. In some cultures, when someone dies, you shave your hair. In other cultures, you grow your hair. In other cultures, you keep some of the loved one's hair for a long time. Again, someone dies, we're feeling badly, we want to do something. Something else that's in the environment literally is our hair, and we use our hair or other people's hair as a way of a ritual to grieve. One of my other favorite ones is in some cultures, and you can think of the mismatches here. In some cultures, it's extremely inappropriate to cry at a funeral. You should sit stoically. And in other cultures, it's required, in fact, that you cry very dramatically near the coffin. So you can think about how, if you went to the wrong funeral, how offended everyone would be by you sitting there like you have no emotions, or you being very emotional when you're not supposed to. The last one in rituals, and then I'll stop, they're really, really interesting. In some cultures, when somebody dies, you close all the windows and doors. In other cultures, you open all of them. Again, there's something in the environment that we use to sort of help ourselves. So the question was, people do these things, but are they actually helpful with grief? Because humans do all sorts of things thinking they'll do something, but in fact, they're not that effective. So the first thing we did was some surveys of people who'd lost loved ones, and we just asked them, not what ritual did you do, but what did you do after they passed away? These are some folks who wrote what they did. These are a little sad. One woman wrote about her mother. I used to play the song by Natalie Cole, I Miss You Like Crazy, and cry every time I heard it and thought of my mom. And this woman was an older woman whose husband had passed away, and she said, I washed his car every week as he used to do. Her husband had an antique car that he loved, that he never ever drove, but he washed it every weekend. And when he passed away, his wife, who also had never driven the car, kept the car and washed it on the same day that he had washed it. And she said, I've never told anybody this because I thought my kids would think I was crazy and make me sell the car. And on one level, it is, let's say, crazy to keep a car that you don't drive and wash it. And yet on any human level, you can see how deeply powerful and meaningful that is for her as a way to honor her husband. A little funnier side, we also asked people if they had a relationship that ended. And I'll show you some examples. We said, what did you do when the relationship ended? These are real people, I promise. Somebody wrote, I wrote a letter expressing my feelings, and I never mailed it. I destroyed the letter and let my painful feelings go. So writing a letter is sort of the thing itself, like I'm trying to write something. Destroying it seems a little more ritualistic. This is my favorite one. I looked for all the pictures we took during the time we dated. I then destroyed them into small pieces, and this is the best, even the ones I really liked, and then burnt them in the park where we first kissed. Some people are laughing uncomfortably because they've done that, I think. It's like, ha, 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 ha. And then you're like, oh, that guy. Again, we could say this is unusual behavior, and yet again, you could feel how that might actually help. And it turns out when we code these descriptions, people who spontaneously report doing more ritualistic things like destroying and burning are a little bit more over the loss than people who don't report doing those things. And it's because they feel a little bit more of a sense of restored control. So when someone dies in your life or when a relationship ends that you didn't want to end, one of the things that we feel is a loss of control. This happened to me and I didn't want it to happen, and now I don't feel in control. And one of the things that rituals do is they sort of help us feel a little bit of a sense of control again, and that renewed sense of control helps us with our grief. I want to say very clearly, if you do a ritual when someone passes away, that's not the only thing you should do. Rituals aren't magical, one-stop, change your life forever sorts of things. Of course not. You need to seek out social support and do everything else that you need to do when you lose someone you love. But rituals are one of the tools that we can use actually to feel a little bit better and cope with these losses. But these are all correlational data, so maybe just people who do rituals get over stuff faster just naturally. So we wanted to do an experiment. You may be thinking, how could you do an experiment on topics like this? Because we can't, for example, randomly assign people to break up with their boyfriend or girlfriend and then see what happens after that. So we switched to another domain of loss. And I want to be clear, I am not saying that losing money is the same thing as losing a loved one. I know that it's not. This is just the thing we could study in the lab. They're obviously very different, although you'll see they have some properties in common. So this mean experiment that we did, we had people in groups of 10 come into our very boring basement laboratory, and we told them, one of you is going to win $200 and get to leave right now, and the rest of you have to stay here for 2 hours and fill out surveys for us. And then to be extra mean, we had them write an essay about what they would do with the $200 if they won it. And then we ran the lottery for real, and one person won, and they actually came up and got the money and ran screaming out of the room to have a nice day. Everybody else was stuck in the room. Some people in the room, we said, just try to forget about the loss. Other people, we said, distract yourself with something fun. And then a third group of people, we said, do this ritual. And the ritual was, and we took this actually from the descriptions that people had told us when we asked them in their real lives, the ritual was draw a picture of how you feel, sprinkle salt on it, tear it into little pieces, and then count to 10. Remember, this is a ritual that we made up for people that they had not used. And what we find is that people who try to distract themselves are a little bit happier, but they don't get over the loss. Nor do people who try to sort of not think about the loss as well. They actually, if anything, are worse off as a result of doing that. People who do the ritual feel a little bit better about the loss, and it's because, again, they feel a little bit more in control of their outcomes. They don't feel great about losing $200 by any means, but they feel a little bit better about it because they went through this ritual. So that was sort of the second domain that we looked at, which was we looked at sort of team rituals and how that leads to liking and coordination. We looked at these grieving rituals and how that's related to this sense of control. But then we really started to see that rituals are everywhere. So I just want to tell you briefly about several other domains that we've looked at to give you a sense of just how wide the investigation has become of all these rituals. So if you can't see it at the bottom of that Starbucks sign, it says, "Take comfort in rituals." Drinking coffee is a very powerful ritual for many, many people all over the world. And we wondered whether rituals with food actually make you like food even more. So what we did was a lot of experiments, but just a simple one is we had we gave people free chocolate and said, eat the chocolate, which is usually like a very good day. If somebody gives you free chocolate, even though that's Hershey's chocolate, which only Americans like, still it's a pretty good day if you have chocolate for free. And we asked these people, how much did you like it? Other people, though, we did this. Break the chocolate bar in half, unwrap half, eat that half, unwrap the other half, eat that half. Same free chocolate, they ate the same amount, but these people did it in a little bit more ritualistic fashion, and in fact, they liked the chocolate more than the people who just got to eat it however they wanted. And one reason for that was because there's this wonderful word, savor, to savor things in life. We usually rush through everything, but sometimes we savor moments. With the chocolate and the ritual, people savored it more, meaning literally they left it on their tongue longer and sort of let the chocolate wash over them in a wonderful way, whereas people without the ritual just sort of put the entire chocolate bar down their throat because that's how people typically eat chocolate. So chocolate better with rituals. We thought, well, chocolate's kind of a hedonic sort of nice thing to eat anyway. We did it with wine as well. Wine rituals also. You're happier after it tastes better, literally, after you do a ritual with wine. But we thought, could we do it with something that's more boring? And we thought, what about carrots? This was like a strong test of rituals. So we didn't have them break these in half, but with carrots, we have them do a really silly ritual where they sort of knock on a table and clap and then eat a carrot. Knock on a table, clap, eat a carrot. Knock on a table, clap, and then we say, how excited are you about the next carrot? Typically, responses to that are quite low. Generally, we're not excited about carrots. People who've been doing a ritual before they eat carrots, and then they do the ritual, and then we don't give them the carrot, they really want the carrot. It's like, because it's part of the whole thing that they're into now. But if you do different things each time, if you knock sometimes and then snap sometimes, it doesn't happen. So repeating the ritual seems to kind of create a sense of being part of a ritual and enjoying the carrots more. So these are the three that I've talked about so far. Again, I just want to tell you about a couple more briefly before I'm out of time. One of the things I want to highlight with all of these, so when we started studying rituals, we had a sense that maybe rituals, when we do a ritual, it makes us feel a certain way, and that helps us with a bunch of problems that we face in the world. And we were wrong, actually. So rituals don't, when you do a ritual, it doesn't make you always feel X. It makes you feel very different things in very different domains, which means they're a really useful tool, actually. So in teaming, when you're working on teams, rituals make you feel a little bit more, you like each other more, you feel coordinated more. In mourning, however, what happens is control is restored. And in consumption, what happens is this savoring and engagement increases. And for example, you don't feel any more control when you're eating the carrots. That's not what the ritual does in this domain, which means they're very, very flexible, actually. We can use them to feel all sorts of different ways and in all sorts of different domains. And I just want to tell you about 3 more. Another domain that we did where, again, rituals are ubiquitous is performance rituals. You know, before athletes and musicians go on stage, they do these crazy rituals. So does everybody else. It turns out you may have one yourself. If you think you don't have one, next time you need to speak in front of a group, do it in a different order and see how weird you feel if you couldn't do the thing you usually do. Here we had people, this is my colleague Allison Wood Brooks, we had people sing karaoke of the Journey song Don't Stop Believing, which is not only a terrible song, but a very hard song to sing, in front of other people. And the program we use for karaoke in real time tells you how bad you are. It shows like red terribleness when you stink at singing. And the question was, if people do one of these pre-performance rituals, will they feel calmer, and then will they do better? And we compared that to a thing where we told people, calm down, which is most of the time when we're anxious about things, we say calm down to ourselves. If anything, that backfires, so don't do that. Doing a ritual before, actually, though, did calm people down and led them to perform a little bit better on the singing. Not great. If you're a bad singer, you're still a bad singer, unfortunately. But a little bit, it pulls down the anxiety and helps you perform a little bit better. And the reason is actually when you sing and you're nervous, your voice wobbles kind of like this because you're so nervous, which means you're singing badly according to the algorithm of the game. So if you're calmer, your voice is more like this, and you're going to sing a little bit better on the task. Second to last domain is this idea of celebrating with other people. In this one, we looked both at family rituals and at couples rituals. Couples rituals are really interesting to me because couples that have a ritual report being happier than couples who do not. So first off, think right now if you have a ritual or not, and start one if you don't have one. There's a wonderful episode of the show This Is Us, where someone is talking about when he knew his relationship was over. And his friend said, you know, what happened? I thought you guys had such a great marriage. And he said, well, you know, every morning for years, I would get up first, go downstairs and make a coffee, and then I would bring it up to her, and we would drink coffee. And he said, one day I just forgot. And then he said, and that's not even the worst part. The worst part was she didn't even notice. So painful. It's just coffee, right? Coffee doesn't mean anything at all, but in the context of a repeated relationship ritual, it almost means everything about how the relationship is going. We do find that couples that have rituals tend to like each other a little bit better, and when a ritual starts to fade out, it's usually a pretty bad sign for the relationship, because in this case, they bind us together. They make us feel a sense of belonging. With families, I'm one of 4. I have 4 older siblings, so my whole life has been family events, basically. Families that have rituals tend to get along a little bit better around the holidays, and they tend to keep getting together more, actually, if you have a ritual. And here what we find is it does make the family like each other a little bit more, but what it really does actually is, if you have ever been to a family event, they can be a little bit awkward. People are standing around, not sure. You had this dynamic when you were children, but now you're adults and you're not quite sure what your roles are. So you're sort of hoping that a sports thing comes on TV and turn it up really loud so nobody has to talk. What rituals do is they tell you what to do. So instead of standing around awkwardly, you say, oh, this is when you two go do that, and then I'll go do this, and those 3 people do that, and then at this time we'll meet again and we'll do this. And then by the time you're done with all of that, the holiday's over and nobody got in a fight. So they're quite helpful, actually, for getting us through these sometimes stressful events. And then the last domain that I just wanted to mention briefly is something we've been working on more recently about whether rituals can help us exert self-control, which is really the fundamental human problem of all problems, which is we want to be a certain kind of person, and then the world gets in the way and we can't be that kind of person. Could be like be a nicer person, eat healthier, exercise, whatever it might be. We wondered if doing rituals can sort of help us feel a little bit more sense of self-discipline because they are themselves such disciplined behaviors. And if we have people do rituals, can we build that into sort of a habit of engaging in that behavior? Here, our results are early, actually, so we're still doing research on this. It looks like that rituals help self-control in some domains, but not in other domains. They do seem to help with things like eating and exercise. They don't seem to help so much with turning yourself into a nicer person. And honestly, we don't know why exactly. So one of the interesting things about studying rituals is we don't know the answers yet. We're still trying to figure out when and why they work and when and why they don't work. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you is this has felt, I'm not going to make you do this again, I promise. This has felt like a talk about, rituals are amazing, and if you do rituals, you'll be the happiest person in the world. Of course not. With all of these domains in life, there's many, many other things that are important other than just doing a ritual. That's not what rituals do. Again, they're just one tool that we seem to use in lots of situations that can be helpful. But they also, of course, have a dark side. So rituals aren't just great and everybody's happy and getting along. Rituals are also involved with and implicated in some of the biggest differences that we have. So we did a study much like this. Imagine the room is divided in half, and there are two screens, and you can only see this screen, and you can only see that screen. And there's a divider, so you can't see each other either, but you can hear each other is the key. So imagine that. What happens is first you get this, and you're doing it, and you can hear the other side doing the same thing, okay? You don't know who they are, you don't know anybody in the room, whatever, but you can hear them doing the same thing. You're doing it well. And then what we do is, some people do what you did at the very beginning. So imagine this side is doing that, and this side does this. And what happens is people on the different sides of the room, they look over very angry at the other people, very angry, and they say, they're doing it wrong. Remember, we made up this ritual ourselves, and they've never done it before, ever. And yet, immediately, each side thinks the other side is doing it wrong. And it's strong. There's like anger at the other side. They actually behave less generously toward each other as a result of just saying yeehaw instead of let's go. And you can see rituals, of course, in many conflicts in the world where groups have somewhat similar rituals, but they bump up against each other, and they're a real source of conflict as well. So just to say, it's not that rituals always lead to positive outcomes, but they always have a big emotional impact on human thought, feelings, and certainly on human behavior. So I started by saying sort of what is a ritual. I'll just end with this. This is one of these topics that you study where you start to lose your mind a little bit, where everything starts to feel a little bit ritualistic. So if you think that you don't have any rituals in your life, you may have seen in these domains that you have rituals that you practice, but actually just observe yourself and others. It's really interesting to see what aspects of life are ritualistic and which ones are not, and when you can add things or subtract things of rituals that actually will improve your day. And with that, I will stop, and I think we have time for Q&A. Thank you.